there, and welcome to the Plugged In Show. I'm Paul Asay. Netflix is unveiling a new Western. It's called American Primeval. It's set in the 1850s when the Wild West was still very wild and barely a part of the country, really. It's an interesting show from what I understand. Our own Bret Eckelberry has actually seen it, and he will be talking a little bit about it. My guess is that it's not too family friendly, but we shall see. But we're using
What
that.
makes you say that?
So we'll use that show actually as a springboard to talk a little bit more deeply about Westerns in general, because we know that Westerns have been such an important genre within the American film landscape for, oh my goodness, more than a century now.
Yeah, a long time.
A long time. So we'll be talking a little bit about Westerns and what they mean to our culture and why we still kind of like them. Or do we still kind of like them? That might be a question we ask. So, and then while we're talking about things that we like, let's talk about screens, which we may like a little too much. We know that we do love our screens. Screen use goes up, it seems like, every single year. Most of us are not necessarily thrilled with our own screen habits, much less the habits of our kids. So we'll talk a little bit about an effort that Plugged In is actually going to be engaging in a little bit later on this year. We'll give you a little sneak peek as to what that looks like. But we'll leave that for our second segment. For now, we're going to talk about Westerns, and I'm going to be talking about it with Jonathan McKee and, of course, Bret Eckelberry. Hey, guys.
Hey.
So,
Hey.
hey. I'm surprised no one said
Yeah,
howdy.
we said howdy.
Howdy.
Yeah,
Howdy.
we
Yeah,
missed an
that's what we
opportunity.
did.
Howdy, partner.
Yeah, we did.
Anyway.
That moment's gone.
So, obviously, we tend to go on rabbit trails here at the Plugged In Show. And a few episodes back, we actually talked a little bit about Westerns. We usually have this running joke that says, oh, but that's another podcast because we mentioned Westerns. Little did I know, this was going to be that podcast. So
Here it is. Here it is. It's
here it is,
Yeah.
just as promised. So for our icebreaker today, I wanted to ask you guys, what is your favorite Western and why? Jonathan, let's start with you.
Oh man, yeah. I that's even a tough one, and it's funny because when you bring up that there's a new Western and you mentioned American Primeval, it's that's kind of a series. So I would even ask you, are series included in this question? Or is it
Series are
just movies?
totally,
Yeah.
they are totally included.
Yeah.
Totally included.
And when it is series, does that mean it can only include Westerns of long ago, or can it just be a film about some rednecks in Texas today? Because thank you, our Texas listeners. Well, I'm thinking about because you can't think of, and the reason why I bring this up, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this in the podcast is, Yellowstone has pretty much made the genre popular, and Yellowstone isn't really a Western, but I mean, you can't go into Sam's Club without seeing Yellowstone pillows for sale. It's probably, I would argue, it changed the election. I would argue that Taylor Sheridan's following is so
And that
incredible.
is definitely another podcast.
Yeah. So the series, 1883, you could call a Western. His film, Hell or High Water, was a modern day. You could almost call it a Western. So there's lots of things in genre. 1883 would probably almost be it for me, but I'm gonna go with Kevin Costner's Open Range back in 2003.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin
For me,
Costner's
that is
Open
just-
Range.
It's one, yeah, it's overlooked, but I'd say it's one of the more realistic. It's just not, these outdone like Hollywood gunfights. It's more, I think, what would have actually happened. Real characters. My wife isn't a huge Western fan. She loves it. We probably watch Open Range once a year, and she loves it. She just loves the characters. She loves the relationships. So anyway, Open Range. And if you haven't seen it, listeners, it's a good one. I mean, we all would say Unforgiven or those ones that we all know are great. But man, Open Range, really good.
Check out the Plugged In review before you watch, though.
For sure. But with all of these, that almost goes without saying at this
It
point.
really
but
does go without saying.
never hurts to mention again. But I'll give my dad a shout out here because he's a big Western fan and he loves Open Range as well. That's one of his favorites.
What is it even about?
Cool.
I'm
He's
not
got
even
good taste.
I'm not aware of the movie. So what is it about?
Yeah, yeah. It's basically Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall. Well, do I need to say more?
Robert
There we go.
Duvall.
Yeah.
Oh
But,
my goodness.
Yeah, yeah. And they're with this, basically these hired hands, and they've got cattle, and they go into this town where there's this, guy that kind of is running the town who's corrupt, and the sheriff's corrupt, and one thing leads to another, and there's kind of a face-off between them, just saying, hey, you know what, this ain't right, And to quote Danny Glover in another great Western, and I'm tired with what ain't right. Come on, anybody? What Western is that?
You lost me. I'm sorry.
Silverado. Come on.
Oh,
Silverado.
very good. Yeah,
Okay,
never
anyway.
saw that
Okay.
either.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
all right, good deal.
So good. What? What? How are you even doing this podcast? You haven't even seen Silverado?
I've never seen Silverado. Never.
Brett, we're taking over this. Paul, just sit and listen.
All right.
Just look pretty.
I'll listen to the experts, learn a little something about it. Hey,
Yeah.
what are those things they're riding? Are those they're like,
Yeah.
Are they horses? What
Those
is that? What a
animals
horse
they're
looks
riding
like?
on, yeah.
Anyway, all right, Brett.
Okay, I will stick with Kevin Costner as well. I will
Ooh.
go with Dances with Wolves. I really
Yeah,
love that
yeah.
as a Western. I think as a movie, it just does a great job of capturing kind of the grandeur and the beauty of the American West. It doesn't necessarily shy away from the bad stuff
Right,
that
right.
happen
It's
on
a
the
harsh
frontier
movie.
as well. It can be harsh, but it can be beautiful as well. And there are some really powerful relationships that develop over the course of the movie with Costner's character, who really comes out to the frontier because he wants to see it and experience it before it's gone forever, right? And it really hits on that Western idea of kind of the encroaching civilization that's taking over the wild frontier. So I'll go with Dances with Wolves.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of good moments.
It is interesting how much we've already talked about Kevin Costner because he really has been instrumental.
Yellowstone Open Range Dances with Wolves. It's all Costner right now.
Well, there is so much that he's done to
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
further
Yeah.
the genre,
Yeah.
right? He loves it. I know that he's spent like $1 billion of his own money to make his newest
Horizon,
movie.
yeah,
Horizon, yeah. It wasn't
yeah,
completely
yeah.
well received. It wasn't quite Dances with Wolves, but
No.
you do have to admit he has a lot of passion for the genre.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So I am going to go with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
only non-Kevin Costner movie on this list. It's a movie that everybody should see, honest to goodness. High Noon. High Noon. It's
Yeah,
the
I knew you were gonna go back.
quintessential Western.
Yeah.
Gary Cooper, Grace Kelly, the most annoying
Yeah.
song in film history, maybe, but that's the only drawback of this movie. It is a great distillation of kind of that ethos, that sort of moral crucible that Westerns can sometimes allow us to sink into. It's about this guy, this sheriff. He's about to be attacked from all sides by these horrible people, and he's trying to get like a posse together to help him fight these guys off. No one will join him, so he winds up standing alone. And it is just so good. Gary Cooper at his best. I'm telling you, Jonathan, I know you haven't seen it. Even though you've seen Silverado, you got to see it.
No, it's good. It's good, I wouldn't say it's good and bad and the ugly good, but it's good.
Oh, nice. Very good. Very good.
And
I'll give you a fistful of dollars for
about
that.
annoying songs. I mean,
Nice.
oh,
Nicely done.
there you go. But I mean, what song is more annoying than wow, wow, wow? I mean, come on. I mean that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you have a
I
point.
think Good, Bad, and the Ugly wins the most annoying song.
What is it
man,
about?
I don't agree.
Oh,
Enrico Morricone, like I like his soundtrack. I like his scores.
So this
Yeah,
might
no,
be.
I like it, but it's so bizarre. I mean, literally, he's like, wow, wow, wow. I was like, I thought it was brilliant.
Jonathan, I don't know if you and I have ever agreed on the podcast before now, but I totally agree
Yeah.
with you. It's just not great.
When you
Man.
But
just
it
said
is
annoying
very,
song, I mean, that's what I thought of.
it's
Yeah,
very memorable though. Very
Very
memorable.
memorable. Yep.
So tell us,
it is.
let's shift into our podcast improper, talking about memorable.
Mm-hmm.
American Primeval miniseries, is that going to be memorable? Like 20 years? Are the plugged in people of the future going to be talking about American Primeval?
I don't think plugged in families, let's just say, will find this one to be a favorite, at least with what I've seen so far. So to just give kind of an idea of the story thread of American Primeval, Netflix miniseries, it follows a mother and her son. They are running from their past. They're escaping out west. Paul, you mentioned it's 1850s, so they're kind of in Wyoming, Utah area, so on the edge of that frontier. And really, as they're trying to get out there, they're trying to get to her son's father, who's supposedly out there. They're trying to get to him. They encounter just the harshness and the cruelty of the West out there. And pretty much everyone they meet, that's including the American military, that's including Native American tribes, that's including the Mormon militia that is
The Mormon militia.
headed up by
Yeah.
Brigham Young at the time. Lots of violence, pretty grim show overall.
Yeah. So it's really sort of a travelogue in a way, where they're actually traveling across the country. This doesn't take place in one particular town.
Generally, it does. It takes place in a few locations, I would say, or around a few locations. You're looking at the Wyoming, Utah kind of territory. So it doesn't take them long to get out west.
Gotcha.
And once they're there, it kind of bounces around between a few characters. But the main story arc is that mother and her son that are trying to keep going, outrun their past.
So is violence the main problem here? Do you have any language issues that we would need to worry about? I would imagine that when you're talking about this type of really gritty Old West environment, you're talking about a mom on her own. There could be some other problems involved with that.
Yeah, I would say that there is, when language pops up, it is pretty harsh. I would say there wasn't as much of that as maybe I anticipated with the violence and gore issues in this as well. But yeah, there is some harsh language as well as some, let's say, not so subtle hints at like sexual violence, some other things like that, just women out on the Western frontier and just kind of being exposed to some not so good people, let's just say.
Well, and that's an interesting thing, because I would imagine that in the Old West, as it really was, this is meant to sort of portray, I would imagine that the makers say, yeah, this is the way it was.
Yep.
But that's a pretty bleak place.
It's pretty bleak. I think that, I mentioned Dances with Wolves as one of my favorite Western movies. And I think, again, that movie didn't shy away from some of the violence that happened on the frontier, some of the bad guys that were out there and were taking advantage of the situation, right? Not a lot of oversight in the Wild West. But it also kind of misses that element of the adventure, the beauty, and the great good that can come out of people in a situation like that as well.
I think that's a really good point, because it feels like when we're talking about sort of the Westerns that resonate with us, it really does sort of become that opportunity where we see, there's not a lot of law enforcement. And the law enforcement that's out there, you never know whether they're going to do their jobs or not. There's a lot of danger involved.
Yep.
But in the movies, at least, the movies that I tend to gravitate toward within this genre, there's this sense of, this is a really harsh place. This is truly a really fallen world, and it feels like it. But it gives the characters an opportunity to sort of prove their worth, you know? And it gives them an opportunity to go down a good trail or a bad trail. Would you say that that's one of the appeals of the Western genre?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, it's kind of a repeated theme. You think of like I shared Open Range, which Paul hasn't seen, but anyway, you think of it. No, but you think of so many of these where, how often is the Magnificent Seven? There's this injustice being done to a town. Sometimes not just an individual, but to a whole town. And what do? You know, the town reaches out. Is there anyone who can help us? Yes, the A team. I mean, the Magnificent Seven, you know, and so the Magnificent Seven comes in and they, you know, and literally it's this kind of this, you know, this gathering of misfits, these guys who are kind of almost guns for hire, but they find that no, there's something more noble here. There's something worth fighting for, and it's good versus evil. And we see that theme a lot in Open Range. That's kind of what we see. I mentioned Silverado. You know, that ain't right, and I'm tired with what ain't right. You know, that's definitely a recurrent theme we see.
I totally agree. And I love the fact that you brought up the Magnificent Seven, because that's a really fantastic movie that really illustrates exactly what we're talking about. And it sort of illustrates both sides of the point. If you're not familiar with the story, Jonathan laid it out pretty well. There's this village, there's village under threat, there's some desperados who are wanting to take everything from this village, and they hire sorta these notorious gunslingers. You know, these are products of this harsh world, but they decide to do something good. And it's a really good movie. The original is better than the remake, I think. But yeah, it's a powerful movie, and that's what brings us back to this genre.
Or go back to Akira Kurosawa, which is
Seven
really
Samurai.
before, Seven Samurai is what launched Magnificent Seven. Magnificent Seven was like, let's do a Western version of this. So go back to 1954, Akira Kurosawa for the original.
The original.
And if you want another version of this story, Three Amigos.
I knew you were going to say that. Oh my goodness.
Three Amigos.
I was just waiting for an opportunity to drop that in.
Three Amigos.
My favorite character, the singing bush.
Yes.
Oh, the singing
the
bush.
invisible swordsman.
Do you want to sing My Little Buttercup?
No, I'm okay.
Yeah, or the invisible swordsman.
The other thing
that ladies sing their song.
That's awesome. Yeah, the Three Amigos. It is
I
worth
guess
a little
annoying
bit of
songs
watch.
is the common theme we're talking about.
Really. So you have good and evil themes and annoying songs. That's what Westerns are all about. Also horses.
That's right.
Also horses.
Sorry, Paul was trying to make a serious point, and I feel like I derailed it. Go ahead.
No, but it's true.
We did.
I do think, though, when you're talking about Westerns, you're also talking about this brand of individualism, right? And I would imagine that for a lot of people today, where we live in a pretty comfortable world. You know, we have all the comforts of home. I brewed my coffee. I got into my nice comfy car to come to this show. You know, we have these comfortable lives that feel a little bit, sometimes maybe a little too secure, a little too staid. One of the beauties of the Western genre is that it allows us to vicariously live through these characters, right? In a time when the world was a little bit more open. You know, it was a little bit more free and a little bit more dangerous. And I think that can attract us too as moviegoers, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, Westerns are adventure films, right? One of the strengths of the Western is, I think, the flexibility of the genre. You can tell a lot of different stories within it. But I think at its core, the idea of, you know, the frontier and conquering the frontier or going out into the wild frontier, it's at its heart, it's an adventure film. And I think, so what you're talking about there, you know, we maybe feel like there's a lot of adventure that does not exist in our lives. So we can live vicariously through, you know, this gunslinger that's going out to defend the innocent, right? To do what's right, you know, to stand up against the evil that might be out there, right? So I think it really hits to its core as an adventure type genre.
Yeah. I love the fact that you're able to explore those things within this. And one of the things that I think about in sort of these classic Westerns is it's almost become a cliche, where you have sort of the white hat characters, the dark black hat characters, you know, sort of the Gene Autry, John Wayne era Western where good and evil were truly defined. But there's a lot of moral ambiguity that Westerns can sort of explore as well, right? I love that. You know, when you mentioned earlier Unforgiven, which is a really, really harsh movie by Clint Eastwood, but it might be, when you just look at it as a film, maybe his best work. And that really explores that, doesn't it, Jonathan?
Yeah, it does. I mean, if you think about it, you've got this guy who used to be a bad guy, okay, to simplify, Clint Eastwood character. And he throughout the film, it's actually it Unforgiven has a lot of laughs. And he always talks about I used to do this and I used to, but I'm not that way anymore. And he talks about how his wife changed him and how he's completely, doesn't do
Yeah.
that anymore.
Hmm.
But yet but just when he thought he got out, they pulled him back in. Oh
To
wait, that's
pull
a
a line
different
from
film.
another
And
movie.
yeah, but they do, and they pull him back into it, and he finds these evil guys, and it ain't right. And so even though he's a hired hand, there's that repeated theme again. He's going out there for the money, and he realizes, no, this isn't right. So
Hmm.
it is interesting how films. You mentioned the black hat versus the white hat and stuff. I think a lot of people are trying to, how can we flip this? There's something greater to good
Right.
or evil. It's not about, who you are or your past or what color hat you wear. For example, the remake of Magnificent Seven. Look at the poster. All the good guys are wearing black hats, every single one of them, and it's kind of cool. It's like here's a bunch of guys who are kind of misfits, who've decided they're going to stand up for what's right. So you got Chris Pratt and Denzel and all of them all wearing black hats. So
Yeah.
it kind of flipping it a little bit there.
Yeah, and you're talking about kind of the
And I'll
moral.
even quote. I'll quote First Samuel 16:7. It's not, man looks at outward appearance, but God looks at the heart.
Mm,
There
There
you
we
that's
go.
go.
good.
There
Man
you
looks
go.
at hats. God looks at the heart.
It's easier to just look at a hat. Yeah. So what I was gonna say, just touching on Unforgiven and kind of the moral gray area and ambiguity there. The hero used to be an outlaw, and the villain is a sheriff of a
Hmm.
town who's
Yeah.
trying to bring law and
Yeah,
order
yeah,
to a frontier town, but he's doing it in such a way that he's the bad guy.
Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
fascinating because it really does give you sort of these gray areas to play with, and it makes you really 310 to Yuma. Both the original and
Yeah.
the remake has that same sort of vibe going on.
yeah.
Who's
Yep.
the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Are these bad guys doing good things? There's a lot of interesting maneuvering that some of these movies do. The other
Mm.
thing that I was just realizing as you were talking, Jonathan, is just how many of these stories are kind of these redemption tales. You talk about Unforgiven, who
Yeah.
used to be this outlaw. You talk about the Magnificent Seven. All of them were outlaws. You think that in most of their lives,
Mm.
they were actually wearing the black hats. So you have these threads of redemption where they're actually pushing into becoming better people, maybe through
Hmm.
the crucible of the Western.
Yeah. And you think of 310 to Yuma, this bad guy spends time with this hostage of his, and it rubs off on him. And at the end, oh man, can we say spoiler alert? Well, I'll leave it vague. But at the end, he kind of decides at the last moment to make the right decision at the very end. Oh, God bless Ben Foster. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, again, I want to just point out that a lot of these movies, 310 to Yuma, the remake is rated R. A lot of these movies have issues that you definitely want to take very
Hmm.
seriously. But the themes that they're dealing with, they're powerful, they're important, and I think that allows us. These movies can allow us, if we're willing to dive into them, allow us to sort of deal with some really interesting moral themes. Another thing I wanted to just touch on really quick, Jonathan, that you mentioned at the very top. What makes a Western? You have a
Mm.
lot of really modern movies that feel very Old West. I'd argue that there's a superhero movie or two that pushes into sort of that Western
Hmm.
vibe. I think about Logan. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
that had a lot of callbacks to a classic Western called Shane, which is another great movie with a very annoying
Sure,
child, but that's
sure.
beside the point. But
Yeah.
that's exactly right. But it really did have a lot of resonant themes that fit well within that Western genre.
Hmm.
So, in your opinion, what does make a Western? Do you need horses? Do you need guns?
That's a good question. I don't think you need horses. I think modern day westerns, the pickup truck is a good sub for a horse. But I do think you can make modern westerns now. So I think that it definitely does kind of involve that kind of moral, whether it's the moral ambiguity of the black and white, the element of the frontier, even. So Jonathan mentioned a movie called Hell or High Water, right? Which is about bank robbers in Texas. And, we know Texas is a very big state. So there are elements that even though Texas civilization has come to Texas, right? The wild frontier is no longer there. There are echoes of it because you just have these wide open spaces and you're seeing America and the American West in kind of all of its glory in some ways. So, yeah.
Well, and it's interesting that that's the second time you've talked about this oncoming civilization, as if that's almost like the looming evil is the modern day, not just, it's not like a truck is evil, but maybe the morality and the give and take that takes to build that truck or run that truck, oil, that's all corrupt, right? So there's that coming in. And in Yellowstone, you get into the final season of Yellowstone, all the talk from all the cowboys, and what makes a Western, right? A bunch of cowboys on horses talking about how it used to be and how it's all leaving, and the civilization is coming, this airport is coming. All these guys are going to put up condos instead of the frontier that's there, and it goes back to the Indians' land that was stolen. And there's this very redemptive theme of, man, let's hold on to the way that this was created and let's push back on evil civilization. In that case, Yellowstone is definitely a Western.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. And you do have sort of this sense of, it's an interesting dichotomy when you're talking about these Westerns, because you do have this sense of this lost Eden, this pure Western, wide open space where men and women and children can do what they want. There's a certain purity that comes along with it. And yet, in American Primeval, we see what people want can be so horrible.
Well, right. I mean, people do a lot of different things with freedom, right? And not always good things, right? So I think that's something that American Primeval definitely hits on. Jonathan, one of the things I was going to mention, a movie that I reviewed for Plugged In, kind of a retro review we did, was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And that really hits home this, encroaching civilization, and yet here's the wild frontier, and there's something special about that too, and that's really embodied in the characters played by Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne in that movie.
Right. John Wayne is kind of this example of that pure Western wilderness, while
He's
Jimmy
the cowboy.
Stewart is
He's
civilization.
the cowboy. Yeah, exactly. He's the cowboy. Jimmy Stewart is the lawyer, right? So you really get that tension, that dichotomy there. So spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, right, civilization comes to the West. It jumps ahead in time a little bit. And we see that even though it's brought a lot of good, there is some melancholy there. Right. There is some sadness for something that was lost along the way. So
yeah. Well, I think that's a nice
example.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a nice place to sort of end this conversation. I think that Westerns, one of the reasons they have endured so much throughout cinematic history is just this sense of morality, this sense of paradise lost, this sense of a grimy, fallen world that you have to make your way into. There's so many things that you can do with this genre, and I don't think it's going to be going anywhere.
Can I hit you with one more
Absolutely
little statistic before we go?
Yeah.
So I looked this up. Westerns have been compared in some ways to like superhero movies just because just the dominant genre of a time, right? So from 2000 to now, we've had about 55, somewhere in that ballpark, superhero movies. Can you guess how many Western movies were made between, I think it's 1940 and 1960? So similar time frame.
I am going to guess 100.
Okay. Jonathan, do you have a guess? Okay.
I got nothing.
Hey, that's okay.
I mean, I'm just so curious.
So the number is 140 to 160 per year.
What? What?
Yeah. So the volume of Westerns. You think there are a lot of superhero movies today? Just know, in the golden age of Westerns, they were cranking out those bad boys every other day, I guess.
Wow, man. And how many have we heard of today? That's an interesting thing. Thank you guys so much for
Amazing.
this fun conversation, and we'll ride off into the sunset with that. So the new year is in our rear view mirror now. Some polls suggest that cutting down on screen time was one of the most popular New Year's resolutions. But we know how well those resolutions typically go. Probably a lot of those are already out the window. And we know that by February, 80% of New Year's resolutions are toast. Toast. So if you had a New Year's resolution where you wanted to cut down on screen time, cut down on your family's screen time, we have another opportunity for you. Plugged In this March is going to be doing something we've never done before. During the first week of Lent, we're going to be doing an initiative called ScreenFast 2025, and we're doing it in conjunction with Live It, which is another ministry here at Focus on the Family. The very first day is March 7th, which just happens to be National Unplug Day, which just feels too perfect.
Right.
Unplug with Plugged In, right? So if you are not convinced that you need to do a screen fast, we would invite you to go right now to focusonthefamily.com, live it. That's live it with a hyphen in the middle of it. We have a quiz that will tell you whether you're addicted to screens or not. So it's kind of a fun little test. I took it.
I did too.
How did you turn out?
I was a little addicted.
I was a little addicted too. So we are definitely going to be doing the screen fast.
You're not alone.
So Jonathan, I know that you have done a lot of work within your career, just sort of talking with parents about the issues of screen, the screen in your pockets. You do that feature every single week for so many radio stations. Do you think a screen fast is important?
Yeah, I think it's really good, and I think what's nice is when kids can come up with something like that on their own. I think it's really hard when it's a parent enforced thing. We will fast, but it can be really good if if during family dinner time it's like if mom and dad said, hey, you know you know is there something that we could as we look at this next new year, maybe something that we're gonna let's take a week or and come up with something and say, what if we were to do this? I'll go first. Here's what I'm gonna fast from, and it would be interesting to see what your kids come up with. I mean, I'm sure moms that are praying, please let it be the smartphone, please let it be the smartphone, and then your daughter says, I'm gonna give up eggs, and you're like, but I think it's interesting to constantly provide good information, talk about truth, and I mean that's honestly the reason my daughter and I wrote that book together, The Teen's Guide to Face-to-Face Connections in a Screen-to-Screen World. We talked about how, hey, phones can be fun. It's not like they're evil, but hey, what if we stuck this thing in our pocket every once in a while? What if we actually turned it off? And my daughter, during the writing of that book, decided, I'm going to fast from social media.
Yeah.
So she didn't fast from a screen. She fasted from social media, and she ended up fasting for a year. And she dialogues in that book about what an amazing thing it was for her, how she could also enjoy the moment instead of, feeling like, oh, I got to post about this moment. So yeah, it can be a powerful thing.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with you. It is great, like, if kids would actually come and say, you know what, I'd like to give up my phone for a week or a month, or, I'm going to move away from social media, like your daughter did. The reality is in so many parents' houses, the kids need a little push, and one of the things that we're trying to do with this screen fast is to make it a positive experience, right? We understand, as we've talked about on this show time and time and time again, if you're going to take something away, you need to have something to fill that void. And one of the things that we're going to be doing with this screen fast is we're going to have an entire journey, sort of talking a little bit about suggestions that maybe can help fill that void a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit on the difficulty of, maintaining your New Year's resolutions just a moment ago. Part of that, I think, is, when you try to just say, all right, I'm dropping this, I'm not doing this anymore, or I am going to do this, and it's just such a shock to the system sometimes. If you're giving something up and you're not filling it with something positive, it can be real easy to go back to, well, maybe I'll check what's on. I'll check Instagram, or I'll go on YouTube, I'll go down that black hole again, whatever it might be. So yeah, that's what we really want to do with ScreenFast is we want to help families and equip them with a journey, like you said, great content for every day of the ScreenFast. Call it a ScreenFast survival guide if you want, where we're encouraging families to explore different things they can do together, because that's a big part of this as well. It's not just giving up screens. It's really connecting, or in some cases maybe reconnecting with your family.
That is the key, right? I think that what we want to do, even more than allowing people to step away from their screens a little bit more than they have in the past, is to reconnect with things that are super important to them. And we're hoping, one of the reasons why we decided to do this for a week as opposed to a day or whatnot, is to give families that space, because we know this is hard stuff. It's hard to give up your screens. It's going to be, I'm going to be doing my own personal screen fast for this, probably during the college football playoffs. That's going to be painful. But when we give up those screens for a little bit of time, it can be really hard at first. And then you realize, man, look at all this time that I have. Look at how much more conversations I'm having with my friends, with my parents, with my coworkers. There are some beautiful things that can come about by putting the phone down a little bit. So we would definitely encourage you to check out the quiz. We'll be talking a lot more about the screen fast in the days and weeks to come. So we would definitely invite you to join along with us on this kind of strange little adventure that we're going to do for the very first time. All right, now it is time for our game. And of course, we're going to do a Western edition of this particular game, and that game is Name That Movie. Jonathan, you know how this game is played. We need to think of a movie. We give one little bit of a sentence description on what that movie is, and we ask everybody to guess. And I'm already guessing for you, Jonathan, Silverado. That's my guess.
Okay, well, I guess that means I'm starting. Okay, no, mine's simple. Here we go. I say the description of the movie. You try to guess it. Here it is. Ready? A family moves to Arizona to retire, but encounters a little trouble on the way.
You know what? I'm going to say Tombstone.
Absolutely.
Oh, nice. Man. I feel good.
Just a bunch of brothers retiring in Arizona.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It was a good one. The family almost threw me off, but Arizona. Yeah. How many westerns actually take place in Arizona? A lot of them, actually, because those John Ford westerns, Monument Valley, all Arizona. So
that's true.
So I feel both good and bad about that, but we'll come to the bad later.
And ugly.
And ugly. That's sort of an everyday thing for me. So anyway, go ahead, Brett.
All right. This is mine. So, a visionary outlaw and his gunslinging friend rob trains, ride bicycles, abscond to South America, try to go straight, and return to crime before finally running out of luck.
I know it. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
You got it. Was the bicycle
the
giveaway?
The bicycle. Actually, it was South America.
Okay,
I thought South America. Yeah. I want to sing Raindrops Keep Falling on My... That's a good Western song, right? Kinda?
Well, it's not a bad song. It's
not a Western song.
Yeah, it's a little out of place maybe, but it's a good movie.
Hey, we could have another theme. Movies with happy endings.
Movies that end on a freeze frame.
That was spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
That freeze frame was well done. That was
indeed. Okay, so in my film, the cowboys are the bad guys, and that makes it okay to shoot them.
The cowboys are the bad guys.
The cowboys are the bad guys. Makes it okay to shoot them. Okay is a clue.
I mean,
OK Corral? Okay,
yeah,
so
Shootout at the OK Corral? Is that the name of the movie? I haven't seen it, but...
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I picked Tombstone, too. And I just liked my
oh, there you go.
My clue just too good to scrap it. I thought OK was really good.
I thought you were talking about like the original one, and you're right. Isn't there one called something to shoot out at?
Yeah,
OK
there is the
Corral or
shootout, the
something?
OK
Yeah.
Corral, but I don't know if the bad guys were actually called cowboys, so I didn't want to go there.
All right.
So.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, Paul, you have to actually watch these films.
I'm surprised.
Tonight,
So,
your homework is watch
Silverado.
so both of you did Tombstone, and yet neither of you did "I'll Be Your Huckleberry" reference.
What was
That's
wrong
a famous
with that?
that's
Yeah.
a famous
I know,
line
yeah.
from there.
That's a pretty big deal. Okay,
it is.
Jonathan, I have a deal for you. I
course.
will watch Silverado if you watch the original High Noon.
Oh yeah, well I've seen it, but it's great. Yeah,
You've
good.
seen it? Isn't that the best
I
Western
do.
of all time?
Gary Cooper. Yeah,
Yeah.
And,
Grace Kelly?
I
Can't go
love-
wrong
I need
with
to see
that.
it.
one
Oh,
of my
you do?
favorite. One
It'll
of my
make you
favorite
cry.
television series.
Hmm.
One of my favorite television series is Justified, where Timothy Oliphant is that cowboy hat wearing U.S. Marshal in modern day.
Yep,
And he refers
modern
to
Western.
Gary Cooper a lot.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
It's a
But-
modern Western set in West Virginia, I think.
Yeah, before you watch Justified, look at the plugged in review. So that brings us to a close for
Kentucky.
this particular
Kentucky.
episode. Thank you guys so much for being a part of it. This was a lot of fun. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for listening and viewing. We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear you talk about your favorite Western. What do you like Westerns? And if you do, why do you like them? Are you more of a John Wayne person or a Clint Eastwood person? Tell us all about your association with Westerns. We'd love to hear all about it. And of course, we would love to hear if you're interested in joining us with our ScreenFast initiative. I'm really super excited about it, honestly. So
yeah.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. So be sure to chime in on Facebook, on Instagram, and go ahead and leave us a voice message on our homepage, on our Plugged In Show homepage. And you can always write to us at team@thepluggedinshow.com as well. Thanks again so much for being with us. And we will be talking again next week on The Plugged In Show.
Happy trails.